We got here by the skin of our teeth, and now the problem is, how do we leave this place in safe hands? That's what it's about. No, for me, there are no more achievements. I'm not out to prove anything. I don't have to prove anything. I have lived my life to the fullest. What is it I want to do now? To try and secure the future for what has already been built and not to lose it. That's all. Whether it's going to be done by the PAP or any other person or any other party, that's irrelevant. We must keep a system that will enable this place to stand out and prosper and attract talent. And as long as we attract talent and we've got security and we keep an open system which treats everybody fairly and equally, we will succeed.
How to leave this place in safe hands? That is Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's top concern. At age 87, he's all too aware that younger Singaporeans are far more questioning than their parents and grandparents ever were about the ruling party's way of running Singapore. He wants to educate them on the hard truths about their country and why it needs an exceptional approach to governance. That is why over the course of a year, he sat down for some 32 hours of interviews at the Istana with a team from the Straits Times, opening himself up to be questioned and challenged in a way that he hoped would help him reach out to young critics. The evening exchanges ranged from the ever-sensitive one of race and religion to ministers' pay, the income gap, and his thoughts on issues that pique young people's interest. There were also personal moments when he spoke of his children, grandchildren, and Mrs. Lee, his wife and confidant of 62 years. Here are highlights of exchanges on 10 hot-button issues on which there seems to be a shifting consensus between people and government. The first concerns Singapore's survival.
We have not got neighbors who want to see us prosper. We are an upstart in this region. But we can survive for so long, and I believe can survive given the international environment, provided we have a strong system that enables us to maximize our chances. Are we not vulnerable? If we are not vulnerable, why do we spend 5 to 6% of GDP year after year? Are we mad? This is a frugal government, you know. We dug a deep tunnel for the sewers at a cost of $2 billion in order to use that sewerage water for new water, to be independent. So all the wafer fabs, all the non-potable water, clean water, is catered for in that way. We are not vulnerable. You'll be dead. They can besiege you. The Indonesians just cut off your sea lines and your business comes to a halt. What is our reply? Our reply is Security Council plus defense capabilities of our own, plus a security framework agreement with the Americans. They stop sand. Abundance of sand everywhere. Why? As Mahathir says, even the present size, they are a trouble. You let them grow some more, there'll be more trouble. You got friendly neighbors? Grow up.
You need to persuade large segments of the population that we are not that normal country, that many of the things that are practiced in other countries, including many of the smaller countries, will not work in Singapore, including having a more competitive political environment where leaders are thrown up.
No, we are not preventing competition. What we are preventing is duds getting into government, getting into parliament. Look at the quality. Any person of quality, we welcome him. But we don't want duds in. We don't want Chee Soon Juan, Jeyaretnam. They are duds. They're not going to build a country. But any serious man turns up and forms an alternative. I say, equal to us, I say, good. Then we are getting a proper an alternative.
Are you satisfied with the level of competition that exists now, given our system, or would you actually have preferred something a bit more competitive?
I've told you, we'd be quite happy if we get a small group of equal caliber contesting against us. I mean, you look at the nominated MPs, they talk more sense, right? Would they fight an election? No. So, but they got the brain power, they got the knowledge, but they're not prepared to jump into the sea.
Well, there's a point of view that that's because many people are intimidated by PAP, the climate of fear, crackdown on dissent, and so on.
No. Are you intimidated?
Well, I'm asking you this question, so obviously I'm not. But I'm just saying that there is a perception, and it's a very real perception. I mean, among those of us who usually interview people and all that, it's very hard. I mean, it's very hard to break it down, but it exists. It's fairly pervasive, even among the professionals.
If you believe you are any good, I mean, you look at this chap who stood up for gay rights, Siu Kam Hong. He's not intimidated. He's not intimidated. We have no objections if he goes and joins the Workers' Party and takes us on. We'll take him on. But he can't join the Workers' Party and we just let him lambast us away. We'll demolish him as hard as he tries to demolish us. That's part of the game, right? Why did I break down when I got out on 9th August? Because I left behind tens of thousands of people who would join our rallies, and I knew that they were going to be handicapped because they were again the minority and leaderless. We provided the leadership. So when you tell me we are not vulnerable, I say, God, you just speak to the SAF commanders and why do they do this? 2 years of every young man's life. 5 to 6% of GDP. And a frugal government that builds up reserves. We do this because of hallucinations, or because that is the only way we can survive.
If Singapore thrives, will the PAP?
The longevity of the PAP is based on delivering the good life.
Yeah.
But some people will also say that another factor is the fact that the PAP has very effectively and systematically demolished opposition.
What political party helps opposition to come into power? You tell me. No, I'm asking you, why should we not demolish them before they get started? Once they get started, it's more difficult to demolish them.
Do you ever have any idea or thought of the chilling effect doing that has on a lot of others who may be interested in politics but are frightened of?
Well,
feel intimidated.
If you do the same thing, then you must expect the same treatment. Therefore, you behave in a more civilized way, like more political, like Low Tia Kiang, or even Cham. I've never been rough with him.
Do the
He's
younger
gentle.
ministers share your killer instinct towards political opponent?
Well, I don't know whether they do or they don't. I mean, they've not been called to account yet, but I think...
But do you ever, give them advice that they should be tougher, harder? Or?
No. By the time you're past 30, your character is formed. You will not change.
But if there was someone like JBJ or Chi, an emerging opposition politician, who among the current, ministers would be able to handle them so robustly the way you did, and which you think is necessary?
No, they may not deal with them the way I do, but they will deal with them effectively. No, Everybody has a style. And that style is partly innate and also by the experience you've gone through. I mean, I would not have been so robust and tough had I not had communists to contend with.
You said, unlike the universal acceptance of market economy, there's been no great rush for democracy.
Yeah, because it does not necessarily lead to better governance and stability and prosperity.
At no point in history do we have so many democratically elected governments across the globe. So doesn't that suggest that there are some attractions to democracy?
No, the greatest attraction is you can change governments without violence. In China, the greatest disadvantage was that you can only change governments by rebellion, qi.
If you met Samuel Huntington today,
Yeah.
what would you say to him with regards to that comment?
Say, look, I'm out of power from 1990. If the thing is going to go wrong, this is already 20 years, it would have gone wrong. It's not. And it's the careful selection of people who are in charge, in the cabinet, in parliament, in anti-corruption, the president. I envisage at some place, sometime, people will get tired of stable governments and let's try the opposition. It's bound to happen sometime. I don't know when. I don't think it'll happen in the next 5-10 years because you've got a competent government. Now, supposing we had this recession and had an incompetent government, had didn't tide over and jobs were lost massively, I think you're going to get a rebellion of some sort.
You described the political changes in Malaysia as a tectonic shift, and we know from talking to some of the ministers there that part of that shift was attributed to young people voting for the opposition. And worldwide, in several recent elections, you've had this wave of young people desiring change. Do you see that sort of tide sweeping over Singapore?
Comes the time, if the change is a plausible alternative, yes. But you can see the change is not, the alternative is not plausible. So people come back after I've read all these reports. It's absurd paying the ministers so much. But they cool down very soon. Why? You are making this much in the private sector. You expect these ministers to stay in for 20 years and sacrifice their families?
Should ministers be paid millions?
Taking into account what has happened in the 14 years, are you satisfied with the outcome? I ask this also in the context of the public reaction to it, that there is still public resistance.
There has been 3 elections since then, right? And every election thing crops up. If that were the big issue and we were not delivering, the elections have gone the other way. We are delivering, right? The system is working. Will it continue to work? I hope so. But will it need adjustments? Yes.
It may not have been enough for people to have voted against the PAP in the last 3 elections, but there's a point of view that the pay formula has changed, has altered the relationship between the government and the people.
We must keep a system that will enable this place to stand out and prosper and attract talent. And as long as we attract talent and we've got security and we keep an open system which treats everybody fairly and equally, we will succeed.
Some people worry that with the pay that ministers get, they will become beholden to the PM, afraid to go against the PM's wishes because there's too much to lose. Yeah. Are you concerned about that development?
Shanmugam is afraid to go back to the law. He can go back anytime he likes. He's built his reputation. Ng Eng Hen may be out of practice with his hands, but he's still a top cancer specialist. I mean, they're not beholden. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. You don't measure up, you're dropped. You measure up, it's difficult to find a substitute, that's all. Simple. Well, you can find any number of putative reasons why the Prime Minister can use his patronage to keep a chap docile, but Prime Minister who does that ends up with a dud cabinet.
I mean, one of the points you made just now was that there are no yes men in cabinet because they have options, they can leave. You know, and you mentioned people like Shanmugam, Ng Eng Hen. But some people would say, while they would agree, it's quite obvious that, you know, someone like Shanmugam has options outside. It is less so of some of the other members of cabinet, especially those who have crossed over from, say, the army or from the civil service when they were scholars, you know, from the start.
If they are quality people, they have no trouble going out. If you are successful as a minister, you have no trouble going out.
What's it like to work with his son, the Prime Minister?
My professional relationship with the Prime Minister is very correct. I mean, he writes to me as MM. I write to him as PM. If I have an important matter, I will see him, not he sees me. But there are times when we finish a cabinet, and I said, I'll see you in the office. He says, no, I'll stop by and we'll have a chat in your office. This is an informal thing. But, I mean, I think I make quite sure that the relationship is kept in a formal meeting at formal levels. I mean, I'm not talking to him as a father to a son, but as a minister to the Prime Minister. I mean, that's correct.
Has it been difficult? I mean,
No. Why should it be difficult? I don't worry about ceremony. I mean, he still wants to see me because I give him ideas, he bounces ideas off me, he gets some benefit. So, that's what it's all about. When he doesn't see me for fun. He's got busy things to do, other things.
But have you had any disagreements with him? And how do you resolve if with the Prime Minister if you all disagree on something?
No, if he disagrees, he makes the decision. That's his responsibility. As I've said to all of the cabinet ministers, when I was active, and I was active when I was Prime Minister, I would go by my judgment of what the ground reaction would be, because I'm in touch with people, I'm talking to them, I visit housing estates, especially the new ones, to see what are the new tenants like. And they all happen to be young children who have done well, leaving their families behind in the old estates, so I get to get the feel of it. Nowadays I see pictures, I watch videos, I watch TV. I go down for my constituency. Occasionally I go to like Orange Ribbon or whatever. But there are huge gatherings, and you meet a select group of people who are already supporters of that movement, whether it's the trade unions or constituency. So I tell them frankly, my finger is not on the pulse as it used to be before, and you have to judge.
Is Singapore too reliant on multinational companies?
In this globalized world, and the world is going to stay globalized because you are not going to disinvent all the communications and transportation technology, you're always competing across the board. So unless you're big enough to be on top of the pile in that particular industry, they are going to play a secondary role. You take Singapore. Creative. It was a trailblazer. But look at the trials and tribulations. It had to go to Silicon Valley, recruit people there, keep up with the competition, because we don't have the critical mass of talent. And in the end, all it's got now is MP3, right? The Sound Blaster and so on. Other companies have caught up. What is the future? I don't know. Or you take food and beverages. Teacher, doing well. In that particular field, popiah, skins, a few odd things. But once it begins to succeed in America, it'll be taken over by PepsiCo. How do I know? Because I've attended PepsiCo meetings. They invited me as one of the participants. And they have collected all the foodstuffs around the world. And the outlets are in Latin America, all the cinemas around the world. So you come up with a good product, they pay you, take over. And they're across the board.
What your argument also seems to suggest is if you are a small country with limited resources, necessarily you can't produce a world champion in manufacturing, because eventually you will be eclipsed.
Yeah, you'll be taken over if you're successful, long before you get to world class. There'll be a company that is already eyeing all these possible takeovers.
Okay, but Finland has produced Nokia, and Sweden, IKEA. Let's say these are companies which seem to punch way above what the country's physical size seems to suggest.
All right, Sweden, IKEA. Do we want to go into that? Have we got the wood and the designers? The Swedes are good designers, right? Nokia was, one of these flukes in history. From a controlled society overshadowed by the Soviet Union, they broke through. But they are about 7-8 million. Can they keep up with the competition from Korea, from Japan? Watch it in the long term. How many bright fellows have you got with inventive, creative minds?
Ma'am, you've made all of us very depressed.
No, I'm not depressed. I'm realistic. I say this is our capabilities. These are our capabilities. This is the competition that we face. And given what we have, our assets and our capabilities, we can still make a good living, provided we are realistic.
The more serious question I have is, okay, we don't have the critical mass to be manufacturers of the best things in the world. We don't have the critical mass to be the top innovators. What are our competitive advantages? It seems to me, listening to you, it's our ability to gather the right infrastructure, the rule of law, the system of governance. Are these attributes enough to keep us going?
Supposing you don't have those attributes.
No, now that we have those.
What would happen to you?
But are these enough to
What
keep
would
us
happen
going?
to us?
Are these
No.
enough to keep us going?
No. These are the basics which differentiate us from our neighbors.
And I'm still on the topic of this MNC reliant model that we have today. You've talked about the validity of it going forward, but are there weaknesses to the model that you worry about?
Well, the weaknesses are that the top MNCs may not come. And you get the second tier who will be defeated by the top MNCs. They would have gone to Vietnam because it's cheaper and smarter. And then the production in Vietnam will beat the production in Singapore. So what have we got to offer? Cheaper labor, cheaper land? No. Higher quality supporting structures to justify the higher costs.
Do you mind the income gap?
There's a price to pay for growing at a fast rate, having to import lots of foreign workers and foreign talent, the social cost concern. associated with it.
We should grow as fast as we can sustain that growth. If we can make that growth and you don't make that growth, then we are stupid. You know, Singapore does not understand what slow growth means. When you got slow growth, you have less employment, less this, less that. Everything is...
People at the lower end feel that to some extent the system is stacked against them. A large part of the growth benefits those at the top. It's, I think, made for a more cynical society as well at the lower end.
Pressure of envy is inevitable. Let us consider the alternative. The alternative is slow growth. The disparity will still be there between the high end and the low end because it's globalization. And we are all poorer, right? We are all poorer because if you do away without the foreign talent and the foreign workers, you know, providing competition in the coffee shops and they don't mind them in the marine industry, building sites, but coffee shops, easy jobs. I say, that's on me. But let us remove that. Our GDP will go down by 2.5%.
As the income disparity widens and as this process carries on, wouldn't the political pressure on the Singapore government build to redistribute more and more to the...
No, I don't think we can redistribute more and more in a way which will remove motivation. Our biggest redistribution is capital gains. Everybody gets a home. Your home is sold to you minus land costs. So in other words, immediately you start with chips on the table. And 30 years later when you retire, that home you can multiply by 10, the value, right? Home. Then next, CPF. We keep on topping up, giving them not to spend, but for their retirement. Shares. Every time we corporatize, we give it to them at nominal value, and the smart ones keep the shares. The spendthrift ones sell the shares, but that's before it's risen in price, and that's your choice. Well, you've lost out. But once you subsidize every month, this becomes an entitlement, you are in trouble. So we say, all right, growth bonus, give you this big sum of money, give you. No guarantee that next year we'll have growth bonus, so you just watch out. Be careful how you spend it. So we create a different mindset in our people. Finally, you can say to me, so the chaps at the bottom will become anti the government. Do we change because of that, or do we say, right, then we will lose that number of votes each time? So we got to win from the median upwards. I mean, that's electoral politics.
How well are Muslims integrating?
Your views on multiracialism has been a cornerstone of Singapore's development over the last 45, 50 years. In fact, at the press conference in August 65, you said that Singapore would not be a Malay nation or a Chinese nation or an Indian nation. Can I ask whether, looking back now, what is your assessment of how Singapore has progressed down this road to multiracialism? And whether you feel that we have achieved what you set out to do?
I have to speak candidly to be of value, but I do not want to offend the Muslim community. I think we were progressing very nicely until the surge of Islam came. And if you ask me, from my observations, the other communities are easier to have easier integration, friends, both socially, intermarriages and so on. Indians with Chinese, Chinese with Indians, than Muslims. That's the result of the surge from the Arab states. So if you want to marry a Muslim, you become a Muslim, which is a very big step for any non-Muslim to take. I mean, a way of life has changed. And as for the oath, the pledge every morning, I did not believe at that time that we could ever achieve it, but Raja, being the idealist, wrote it out. And I looked at it and I said, why not? There's an aspiration. But as the years went by, with the resurgence of Islam, you ask me now, is an aspiration not achievable in my lifetime, probably also in my son's lifetime? It may be achievable after the oil age has passed. Then the Muslims are faced with the problem of modern education, science, technology, industrial revolution, knowledge economy.
So even in Singapore, it's highly dependent on what takes place outside.
Oh yes, it's a globalized world. So as long as Islam traveled to Singapore by sailing ships, it was an attenuated version of Islam. So the Islam in Southeast Asia was not Islam by the sword, but Islam by commerce. So it syncretized, especially in Indonesia, with Hinduism, Buddhism, animism. And so with Malaysia. I mean, the Tunku believed in Bomos. And I think so does many Malays. And they say, okay, put a chili up and get the Bomo to pray so there'll be no rain. That's most un-Islamic.
You are not confident that in Singapore things will turn out differently because that we do not practice race-based politics or religion-based politics?
Religion overwhelms. Look, she will tell you that Islamic religion controls every part of your life, right?
Yes, but it doesn't mean that therefore as a citizen I will be,
less
loyal than...
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you will be loyal as a citizen, but because you will observe and you are forced to observe by peer pressure of nothing else, you will have to conform. The generation that worked with me, Osman Wok, Rahim Ishaq, that was before the wave came sweeping them. That generation integrated well. We drank beer, we went canvassing, we went electioneering, we eat together. Now they say, are the plates clean? Is it in the same washing machine? Halal, non-halal, and so on. I mean, they're all divisive. They are distinguishing me from you. I'm a believer, you are not. That's that.
So, Imam, just to be clear, are you saying that the existence of Muslims in Singapore is the main impediment to multiracial harmony in Singapore?
No, I'm not saying that. I think the Muslims socially do not cause any trouble, but they are distinct and separate.
So what do they need to do to integrate? I mean, are they doing enough to...
Being less strict on Islamic observances and say, okay, I'll eat with you.
But there are other ways to integrate without sharing a meal, surely.
No, but I'm telling you the reaction of a non-Malay, right? A non-Muslim.
You know, Evan, when you say that there's a veil between Muslims and non-Muslims, I think most Muslims I know, have lived with the conviction that, they can be fully Singaporean and fully Muslim, and they somehow believe in the Singapore that you have, imagined for your citizens. And now to hear you say that there's a veil between Muslims and non-Muslims, my question to you is, have the Muslims been deluding themselves?
No. There are different
that they will be accepted.
Where AFP started, they were opposed to MUIS, opposed to our PAP Malay leadership, and they came out in opposition to it. But they can do better for the Malays. And we gave them the support, financial, and so on. Then they found that they couldn't compete with Mendaki. And they slowly came around because they were doing the same things, that in fact Mendaki was doing real service. So we are not saying the position is hopeless. We are saying that there is that portion that's under this kind of influence, and all you need is one or two to spoil the whole relationship. One big bomb, we cannot stop the reactions.
What's the impact of growing Christian influence?
The Christians are getting organized and coming out on issues like casinos and this.
But they do not go around with bombs on their bodies to blow people up, right? If they do that, we got a real problem, and we'll stop them. And we'll stop the missionaries too. They are not lethal, and they are law-abiding. We can change the law and they will abide by the law.
Among some non-Christians, there's even concern, for example, that quite a number of cabinet ministers are Christian, and that seems to be tied to education as well, right? Because there's a growing number of well-educated Singaporeans who are becoming Christian.
The broader explanation for this conversion into Christianity is because Buddhism and Taoism and ancestor worship to the Western educated is not convincing.
Within the Singapore cabinet, when there are discussions on issues, to what extent do the ministers' religious beliefs influence the positions they take? For example, on moral issues, casinos, homosexuality, and so on.
No.
Does that ever come up?
I don't think so. No, they are modern thinking people. This is a separate part of their lives. This is the reality of the society. We decide what is in our interest and how will the people react. If look, homosexuality will eventually be accepted. It's already been accepted in China. It's only a matter of time before it's accepted here. If we get a cabinet full of Christians, we're going to get an intolerant cabinet. We're not going to allow that.
I think some people worry that the other religious groups will respond to the aggressive proselytizing of the...
The Buddhists have responded.
Yes, that's right, the Buddhists have responded.
What to do? And they must respond, they must defend their flock from diminishing.
Yeah, man. Just now you mentioned that the core of the ministers tend to be fairly moderate, nominal Christians. How do you make sure that they stay that way? Or that, the people making policies like the permanent secretaries aren't, too inclined in one way? Let's say they may be a lay preacher.
The population as such will not vote for a person who makes his political beliefs. If you don't go and join the Seventh Moon Festival, you will lose votes. And that's one simple test of your flexibility. There are certain Chinese rituals which will not change. And the lower educated still believe in the old pantheons of the Chinese gods and goddesses, Kuan Yin and the rest of them. If you are that kind of a Christian and you shun their temples, you shun their Seventh Moon Festival, you say, no, this chap is no good. He's not part of us. You will lose votes because I don't see the grassroots being converted. If the grassroots are converted, well, then it's total. Then you will also become different. Then we become a different society.
Will Singapore be forever dependent on foreigners?
No, you have been one of the strongest advocates, of opening up Singapore to foreign talent. I think the arguments are fairly well known, but Would we be forever?
At the rate we're reproducing ourselves, yes. Otherwise, you'll end up in 2050, 1.5 persons working to support 2. Not tenable. The whole economy will collapse. And because the burden will be so great, the bright young ones will emigrate rather than pay those heavy burdens. Not possible. I mean, you watch Japan. The economy cannot recover because the older people don't spend so much and they don't work as productively as the younger ones. And their population will sink to 90 million from 127 by 2030. And the number of old people are growing, numbers of them. They refuse to take immigrants, but they've got illegal immigrants. It is not possible, I mean. Why do you think we are asking Singaporeans to reproduce themselves? Because they are not reproducing themselves, we have to depend on the children of the migrants to become Singaporeans, so that the ratio will always be a majority of Singaporeans. So we are making sure that they are spread out, and their neighbors are Singaporeans, and their children are in a neighborhood of Singaporeans and go to school with them. I mean, you cannot change the present generation, whether Indians, Chinese, or whatever. But you can definitely absorb the next generation because they come in, either they're born here, they're very young, they go to our schools, primary schools. They begin to talk like Tauri, and they begin to behave like Singaporeans.
Given that the proportion of the foreigners has gone up so much, also there's some simmering resentment. Is it time now to pay a bit more attention to, soothing the feelings of the citizen?
Some of them come from the smartest schools, high standards, and they end up winning the prizes in school. Bilingual prizes, other prizes, and some scholarships also. So Singapore parents know that their children are going to meet fierce competition. But my answer to that is, do you want this chap working on this is a tug of war, right? We want to pull investments in our side. You want him to join the Vietnamese or the Chinese team, or be one fellow on your side pulling it your way? Your numbers are diminishing. If we were back in the 1960s, 4 children per family, we won't have to just this matter would not arise. But then we would never have had the accumulated capital to create the infrastructure and the schools and the educational institutions that we have created. Because we'll be always trying to catch up with the population. Today we'll be barging with about 6-7 million of our own. But all the developed countries, the women have got equal education and job opportunities. The birth rates go down. What's that?
I think it's been stated that whilst we allow foreigners in, we will try to maintain the racial composition in Singapore.
Absolutely.
How difficult is that going to be in the years to come?
Well, the difficulty will be to find the equivalent number of Malays or Muslims to get those numbers up, because the numbers of Muslims from Malaysia and Indonesia who want to join us are far and few between. Of course, if you let in the laborers, then you'll be flooded. But if you apply the same standards, educational standards, they have less competition where they are, and they got more opportunities. Why should they come here? There are a few Arabs who have come, particularly those married to Muslim women who have been working in the Gulf, and they've decided, well, no, this is not a bad place, I'll come here, and we've not prevented women from bringing their spouses back. I'm not sure it's in large numbers, but I mean, it's a trickle.
And is there a worry that the influx of foreign workers to Singapore will further dilute that national identity we're trying to build, the nationalism that we're trying to foster?
Probably. But what's the choice? No, what's the choice, I ask you? I keep on saying, look, let's get 2 at least, if possible 3. It's not working. It's not working, I mean, what's the choice?
What has to change in Singapore before you consider Singapore to be a nation?
I think there must be a sense of self, a sense of identity. That you're prepared to die for your country, that you're prepared to die for each other. I mean, you just look at the Chinese, how many times they've been invaded, but then they recreated themselves when the invaders got weak. Because there is that cohesiveness, same language, same culture, and the same Han race. That's that. Are we the same language, same culture? No. We have adopted one language, which is a foreign language. If we lose our second language, we have lost all sense of our identity. What is the Singaporean? 44, 45 years. You don't create a nation in 45 years.
What is your own conception, of what constitutes the Singapore identity?
My definition of a Singaporean, which will make us different from any others, is that we accept whoever joins us is part of us. I think that must be our defining attribute. If we don't have that attribute, we say we are going to have only those who are like us. Chinese from China like us, Indians from India like us, Malays from Malaysia are different from us now. But in time they come here, they change. I think that's the defining attribute.
How can a country be green and grow?
Given your pessimism, so can we say therefore that you don't think that the world will come to any realistic multilateral agreement?
No, I don't think so. You watch Copenhagen.
What's going to happen?
No, a waste of time. The Chinese have said, you want me to cut down, you give me clean technology free. I have to grow. And if you don't give me the technology free, which will help the world, I can't afford it. Well, I got to pollute the air with my coal stations. Well, it's quite a compelling argument.
Is there a lack of global leadership on this?
I don't think it's a lack of global leadership. What leader of any big country, or even a small country like Singapore, will say, okay, I give this up, I give up growth, I even have negative growth to save global warming? You recommend that to the Singapore government? I don't think the Singapore government will listen to you. They want to meet their immediate needs, which is employment, raise living standards, avoid social unrest.
So are you pessimistic about the outcome, the long-term outcome?
So I've said at the outset, we must prepare to adapt rather than to hope that we don't have to adapt. How much we have to adapt depends on how excessive the warming takes place.
What needs to change for the world to have a different, mindset and resolve to tackle this problem?
The day the Chinese and the Indians find that hundreds of millions of people along this river basins who are farmers and small traders in the small towns find a water shortage getting less and less because the ice cap in the Himalayas and the Tibetan plateau has diminished. That day, huge problems. Where do these people go without water? How do they feed themselves? They will move across to any place that will support them. So you're going to have real international turmoil.
How environmentally conscious are you? Do you recycle? Do you try to reduce your carbon footprint? Do you sleep with air conditioning?
I do, but what can I do? Without air conditioning, I will not get a good night's sleep.
Another part of being environmentally conscious is not to consume so much, and you're not particularly a great consumer.
No, I'm not. I eat less. I travel less.
That applies to your house as well. I mean, I haven't been there, but people who have been there say you have not done much to renovate. And
Look, I've told the cabinet when I'm dead, demolish it. Because I think I've seen other houses, Nehru's, Shakespeare, and it's a shambles after a while. People trot through and so on. And because of my house, the neighboring houses cannot build high. I said, demolish my house and change the planning rules, go up, my land value will go up.
no, that's part of Singapore's history.
No.
It's true.
Eh?
It's part of Singapore's history because so many historical events took
No.
place. So it should be preserved.
You know, the cost of preserving it is an old house built over 100 years ago, no foundation. Damp comes up the wall because it has no foundation. So the piling around my house has led to cracks.
It's like the old National Library, no architectural significance, but when it was torn down, I think a lot of people still bemoan its loss today.
I don't think my daughter or my wife or I who lived in it or my sons who grew up in it will bemoan its loss.